And welcome to 37th in Jessup. My name is Mark Howard. I teach in the government department here at Georgetown. I'm also a visiting professor at the Jessup Correctional Institution. And I'm the director of the Prisons and Justice Initiative here at Georgetown. Tonight, I'm thrilled to host an exceptional event that represents the culmination of a unique class called Prison Reform Project. Virtually everything about this class has been different and unusual. We had no syllabus with topics and dates and readings. The students called our professor by his first name, because in the fight for prison reform, we're all equals. A major newspaper has been covering our class for a feature article to come out this summer. And I don't know about you, but I've never seen a class that's had a final student presentation project that brings several hundred people into an auditorium. But most importantly, what's made this class unique is that the 15 Georgetown students who are going to be presenting here tonight work together, side by side, with 16 students at the Jessup Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in Maryland. And together they were classmates, Georgetown and Jessup, divided by bars, united for justice. I literally just left Jessup a couple hours ago. I teach another class there on Monday afternoon. And I was with all of the guys who were part of this class. And they asked me to pass on their regrets that they couldn't be here tonight in person. They really wanted to. But their ideas, their insights, their voices, their poetry, and their artwork, and I hope you noticed the artwork that was on display outside by Ren, an extraordinary artist who's in this class. This event is as much about the Jessup students as it is about Georgetown students. And I'm thrilled that some of the close friends and relatives of the Jessup students could join us here tonight. It's very touching. It's a great honor to have you here. You've been down a long, difficult road, and it's really, really hard, but I hope that tonight you can be really proud of your loved ones. Now, in terms of the nuts and bolts of this class, just to give you a sense of how it worked, I picked 15 Georgetown students out of over 50 who applied on very, very short notice to join this very bizarre-sounding class. And then I chose 16 Jessup students who were the top performers in a previous class I taught at Jessup on comparative criminal justice. So I knew going into it that the students in both groups were primed, that they were knowledgeable about the issues, and that they were eager to work constructively to develop criminal justice and prison reform proposals. So what we did is we got together and we divided the students equally, Georgetown and Jessup, into 3 different groups. And each was tasked to develop reform proposals in these 3 different domains: before prison, inside prison, and after prison. And they're still actually in the process of writing more formal reports that are going to introduce some scholarship as well as personal narratives that will be presented at a later date and distributed online. But each group tonight has prepared audio-visual presentations. And actually, the inside team will give you a sneak preview of the 6-episode podcast that is prepared to launch on May 3rd. One of tonight's objectives is to bring the Jessup students to you in a more personal way than would otherwise be possible. And that really gets to the underlying message of this project and of this event, which is that behind prison walls lies a largely unknown and unappreciated humanity. And the Jessup students, and I've gotten to know them well over the last few years, they are good people. They're people who once made some bad choices and mistakes, and they're paying a steep price for it. But they're working every day to make themselves and the people around them better. They're intelligent, they're thoughtful, they're caring, they're reliable people, and I believe in them. And we as a society deserve to hear their voices. So I hope that tonight you'll get a sense of their humanity. Now, I have to add a legal caveat and explanation. The state of Maryland has a victim notification policy that prevents us from using full names and showing photographs of about half of the Jessup students. And this is why we're just using the first names and or nicknames here. And I want to close with a few words of thanks. I want to thank first the Jessup Correctional Institution, JCI, which was extremely gracious in allowing this class to take place in the first place. They let us conduct and record phone calls between Jessup and Georgetown students. They granted media access to cover our class. So you're going to be hearing tonight about many of the problems with the prison system. But providing access and being open to a conversation about reform represents a major step towards reaching solutions. And so they're to be applauded for that, and we're really grateful to them for that. I also want to thank Mayor Walters, who's finishing his PhD in government this semester, who's been an extraordinary teaching assistant, who's helped me so much with this class. I'm grateful to the Doyle Seminar Program, which provided some resources for the class. And finally, I want to thank 3 returning citizens who met with the students and who helped them with their projects. Jeff Smith, Galen Goffman, and especially Vincent Greco. And Vincent is here with us tonight. Vince has been a great resource because he spent 34 years locked up and only recently got out a year and a half ago. And many of those years were at Jessup. And he personally knows and is friends with most of the guys who were in this class on the Jessup side. And Vince now, since he's been out, he speaks at many different universities about criminal justice reform and prison reform. And he actually helped bring to this event tonight a group of students and faculty from Loyola University and also from MICA, the Maryland Institute College of Art. So I've spoken long enough. I think now we want to turn to the main event and hear from the students. And the Georgetown students are going to speak for themselves and for their Jessup classmates. And we'll go in chronological order, starting with the before and then inside and after groups. And so we'll start with Aaliyah Grace Brown from the before prison team.
Hello, my name is Aaliyah, and over the course of this semester, I've had the great pleasure of working with my Georgetown classmates, Brian, Madeline, Maria, and Yoshima, analyzing the circumstances that often lead to a life in prison. We've had the life-changing opportunity to work with some of the most passionate classmates we've ever had. Trey, Ronald, Kenneth, Abu, and Q, all of whom have the misfortune of being incarcerated since their youth. The most vocal member of our class is Orlando Trey Jones, a student Mark introduced to us last semester. Trey came to Jessup practically unable to read, but is now a published author. His contributions were innumerable, and we were truly saddened to find out that he has been placed in lockup for 60 days since the last time we saw him 2 weeks ago. Second was Ronald Epps, whose quiet, thoughtful demeanor and detailed letters were integral in helping us understand the consequences sentencing and incarceration have on families, and this man also has the handwriting of an angel. Kenneth was next, whose passion for mentoring and tangible change beyond our ivory tower motivated us to constantly stay aware of the importance of our work, and this will continue to motivate us in the future. Abu, another vocal member of our group, showed a broad worldview that helped each member of our group immensely. He kept us thinking about the angles of all issues and kept us well fed with his homemade prison wrap burritos. Finally, with Q, whose particular interest in mentoring was crucial as he served as a mentor in numerous programs offered at Jessup. Also, his devotion to staying on task was invaluable in a group with so much passion for reform. I'm not quite sure these guys will ever understand the impact that they've made on our lives, and we can only hope to have left the same impression. Though only as 5 Georgetown students are able to be here tonight, we're representing the work of 10 students, and now friends, pertaining to circumstances of life before prison.
Uneducated.
Unfortunate.
Lonely.
Black.
Sad.
Secluded. Marginalized.
Let me tell you what I am. We ain't thugs, we slave, just being thugs. Nobody knew that when we grew at nigga. The poverty line, we not above, so I come to mass the club, cause we ain't feeling the love. We ain't doing crime for the sake of doing crimes. We moving down cause we ain't doing fine. One out of 10 of us is like to doing time.
In this verse of Jay-Z's song, Say Hello, he says, the poverty line we not above, so I'll come to mask and gloves because we ain't feeling the love. This deprivation of love, consideration, and access to basics are just a few of the crippling effects of poverty. In 2014, 46.7 million people live below the poverty line in the United States, 14.8% of the population. The threshold is adjusted for family size, composition, and age, but does not vary geographically. According to this comparison then, the poverty threshold of a family of 4 with 2 children in 2015 was $24,036 and $12,331 for a single person under the age of 65. Consider living in DC with just over $12,000 a year. Georgetown on-campus housing alone exceeds the poverty threshold for one person. As I'm sure many of you are battling to understand how survival is possible with such tight budget constraints, public perception on this issue is split. In 2014, the Pew Research Center asked Americans about their perceptions of the lives of impoverished individuals who receive government assistance. Respondents were divided among 5 income brackets, ranging between less than $20,000 and more than $150,000. Overall, 47% of Americans believe these individuals have hard lives, and 44% believe they have it easy because they receive assistance without having to do anything in return. Respondents who make over $150,000 were more skewed, as 51% believe recipients had it easy. This study reveals the stigma attached to those who are overwhelmingly disadvantaged economically. Although I was aware of the statistics, the truly crippling effects of poverty were humanized through the many stories of our Jessup classmates.
Well, it's hurtful, it's painful. That's why I said that poverty is the most common thing that you can inflict upon anybody.
Trey's story of childhood poverty is only one among thousands, especially among African American children. As you can see, African American children dominate childhood poverty rates at 38% in 2014. These national statistics are also evident in TC rates, which actually supersede national rates. In the district, 30% of children under 18 lived in poverty, whereas 18% was the national average in 2010. The racial disparities are still clear, as African American children boasted a 40% poverty rate, whereas white children were consistently below 10%.
When I'm 13, I choose between buying a Jaguar, Cadillac, and living in a house with a shoe garage, or living down the road in my broken grandmother's home.
So what does it mean then, when young black children are disproportionately impoverished? Place yourselves in the shoes of our Jessup classmates. Q, for example, who grew up surrounded by poverty in Southeast DC and began to sell drugs as a means to survive. Or Abu, who also witnessed the crippling effects of poverty as he and his brother often accompanied his father to crack houses where he sold drugs. Or Trey, who was seduced into a life of crime at the young age of 12 when he became the triggerman for one of East Baltimore's most notorious drug dealers. His unique story is detailed in his book, Eager Street, also available on Amazon, which gives a detailed insight into the ways in which poverty has an impact on life choices. The correlation between young, poor, black children and lives of crime are extremely high. So when considering incarcerated citizens, particularly those of color, it is crucial to account for the circumstances under which they previously lived. While many of us have the privilege of simply imagining these misfortunes, these are the realities of far too many individuals behind bars. My sincere hope is that you are able to see the humanity in our friends at Jessup as they are battling to do the best they can in a system that constantly works against them.
I am glad that in this administration we have increased the amount of money for handling the problem of dangerous drugs sevenfold. It will be $600 million this year. More money will be needed in the future. I want to say, however, that despite our budget problems, to the extent money can help in meeting the problem of dangerous drugs, it will be available. This is one area where we cannot have budget cuts, because we must wage what I call total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
When talking about the aspects of before prison, a huge amount of focus has been brought to our nation's drug laws. A shift of drug policy from law enforcement and the criminal justice system to medical treatment, harm reduction, education, job training, and mentoring will make significant inroads in fixing our drug crisis. Although none of the Jessup students in our group have been incarcerated solely for nonviolent drug offenses, the effect that drugs and the drug war have had on their communities has been disproportionate. You all saw Trey's reason for selling drugs: survival. Q also followed in his family's footsteps and sold drugs in order to put food on the table. While fixing the drug problem is only a small way to reduce the prison population, policymakers are still failing with status quo policies where law enforcement and incarceration are the primary mechanisms of enforcing drug policy. If several of the Jessup students say that drugs are as accessible in prison as they are in the free world, then maybe putting people in jail for drug offenses is not the best idea. Prison should be the last resort in fighting the drug epidemic, not the first. Our policy proposal advocates for a broad decriminalization of drug possession, where incarceration is rarely used in reducing drug use, and instead treatment is provided for those who need it, and civil violations are given to those who don't. Policymakers need to take evidence-based approaches and be quick to act. Drug laws destroy lives, and by waiting for polling numbers to increase, policymakers are complacent continuing mass incarceration. Over the course of the semester, our drug policy proposal shifted from Trey and my position of outright drug legalization to Madeline, Abu, and Kenneth's position where treatment and programming rather than incarceration is the solution to our drug problem. The next two clips are the voices of Abu and Kenneth. I'm going to finish with two graphics to further illustrate the failure of law enforcement-led prohibition. This graph from filmmaker Matt Groff sources a compilation of government reports over 40 years showing modest decreases in drug use and substantial increases in drug control spending. Our prison population and police department budgets have skyrocketed in large part due to this drug control spending. Billions of dollars for modest decreases in drug use and substantial increases in the number of those incarcerated and in taxpayer expenses. Is outright prohibition really the best step forward? This is only one part of the problem. This graphic from the Sentencing Project illustrates our police's disproportionate arresting patterns concerning marijuana. As we can see, and as several other studies also confirm, African Americans are disproportionately harmed by drug law enforcement, especially when comparing their rates of drug use with that of whites. Michelle Alexander in The New Jim Crow characterized the drug war as the primary mechanism by which mass incarceration becomes a contemporary form of racial control, continuing the legacy of slavery and segregation. And with patterns like this, that argument sure makes a lot of sense.
Relationship between police and communities. Recently, Black Lives Matter has brought attention to the issue of police brutality. The deaths of Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, and many others have all attracted national attention. These cases are more than just isolated incidents. They represent not only a pattern of police brutality against people of color, but also a pattern of poor communities being over-targeted by police. For example, in Ferguson, the rates at which white and black people are stopped by police are wildly different. As you can see in this image from the Sentencing Project, in 2013, 1 out of every 2 black people was stopped for a traffic offense versus 1 in 8 white people. This means that black people were 3.5 times likely to be stopped. Also, black citizens were more likely to be stopped for investigative stops, which are made at the officer's discretion, and for violations related to equipment or licensing, which invariably target poor people who are less able to keep up with the fees associated with maintaining a car and renewing a license. Finally, black people were more likely to be searched and arrested, even though, once searched, whites were more likely to be caught carrying contraband like drugs or guns. We see and
Ferguson, the clear financial incentive for officers to stop and arrest residents at such high rates. Also, we see how serious an arrest can be for someone who is low income. Someone might be stopped and then fined for a minor offense. If they fail to pay, they then have to appear in court. If they miss, or even 5 minutes late for that court appearance, they are fined and an arrest warrant is issued. They get charged with that arrest warrant too. To ensure they make their next court appearance, they're put in jail until their next court date and forced to pay for each night they spend in jail. So I hope this gives you a sense of the pattern. The system of government's bringing in revenue through arrests and court appearances is not restricted to Ferguson. In Georgia, you can be charged $80 for a public defender, even though public defenders are specifically there for people who can't afford attorneys. In Oklahoma, you can pay a prosecutor $40 a month to solve a case, so prosecutors are influenced not by evidence, but by money. Nationwide, people from poor communities are going to jail and accruing thousands of dollars of debt for offenses for which wealthier people can easily afford to pay a fine and then walk free. So, what solutions exist? We talked with the Jessup students about the idea of community policing, which they generally supported. Kenneth, in particular, suggested that police officers be trained to learn and care about the communities they work in. The photo on the screen is of officers in the Watts housing development in LA, a low-income neighborhood whose crime rates have dropped significantly since they implemented a community policing plan. Officers work with community leaders to identify ways for them to be involved in the community in helpful ways. For example, some officers lead basketball practices with kids from the neighborhood. Still, efforts to reform community police relations can only go so far if they happen in a broader system in which financial incentives pervert the roles of police officers. We must focus on arresting and incarcerating those people who pose a true threat to public safety, and not simply low-income citizens who can't afford to pay their fines. The system of drawing in revenue through fines and court fees is largely unregulated, which is part of why it's so easy for governments to retract funds in this way. It's time to bring more cases to court on the basis that such practices are unconstitutional and more carefully regulate when and how jurisdictions may fine their citizens.
Yes, is a psychologist by training. He's now director of prisons in Mecklenburg, Western Pomerania, a state in North Germany along the Baltic, about the size of New Hampshire. There are rich fields here, brilliant sunsets, and Walden, the maximum security prison where Bernjonga is serving time.
Should he have a future for himself? He took a life. Yes, he should. He should.
Yes, invited us to Baltic to show us how the German system works.
The real goal is reintegration into society, train them to find a different way to handle their situation outside. Life without further crimes, life without creating new victims, things like that.
You know, and I get this when I watched the 60 Minutes Team last week, how the moment you go into one of those prisons, you're reminded of your humanity. And that probably shame or guilt you into wanting to behave better and do better. Whereas here, you know, when I came to prison, I was just reminded of how inhumane I am and how inhumane I had to continue to behave if I wanted to survive.
There are a number of issues that face the sentencing system in the United States, but some of the most glaring problems become clear when our system is compared to those of many other countries. In 2013, the United States had the highest incarceration rate in the world, meaning we lock up a greater percentage of our citizens than any other country. A number of factors go into why people are sentenced to prison as opposed to being offered alternatives to incarceration. One consideration is justice for victims. There is no denying that justice must be served in some form and that people within a society cannot act without consequences. An additional idea behind sentencing people to prison is the protection of society from those offenders. However, in order to protect society and the offenders themselves, more needs to be done. The problem with sending people to prison who need help, but not providing that help, benefits neither the incarcerated nor society. We lock people up and throw away the key, forgetting them there until we have to recover that key and release them back into society. 95% of incarcerated people will be released back into society. And right now, when these people exit American prisons, they are generally not well prepared. So what reforms can we implement to make our sentencing process more effective and productive? We must reallocate funds into programs that offer alternatives to incarceration, like this one, such as drug treatment, mental health treatment, job training, community service, and education. Where these alternatives have been implemented, they work. A 2000 law requires California judges to offer non-violent offenders mental health or drug treatment instead of prison time, and it is saving the state an estimated $18 million per year. The most important change we must make is to reevaluate our priorities as a country. We must consider why we are sending people to prison and what we hope to accomplish by sending them there. As a modern civilized society, we need to make a shift to prioritize rehabilitation over retaliation. A more humane and more effective justice system is possible if we really consider this and make a commitment to change our perspective. As our incarcerated classmate Ronald writes, a 25-year sentence is 5 years shy of the numerical equivalent of a whole generation. 25 to life is a sentence that begins with a quarter of a century and can end in another generational lifetime.
So many people get seduced by the life of crime, or even make that one wrong fatal mistake, due to not having positive mentorship in their life, especially our youth. This is where it all begins. Most of our youth who are detained live in impoverished areas and lifestyles. Piss poor, homeless, dealing with physical, emotional, verbal, and drug abuse. Also, depression and neglect. Here's a chart displaying multiple races and what schools they typically attend. High-poverty schools have 75% or more students who live in poverty. The Blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans are the majority who attend high-poverty schools. This correlates to the majority of races who are incarcerated. Statistics show our youth as worthless and incomprehensible, so why waste money on them? And the youth perceive us as, why waste my time at school? Let's take a quick glance into the households' income of the youth, which are usually assisted by government assistance such as food stamps, Section 8, vouchering for housing. 56 to 86% have less than a high school degree, and 72 to 89% of parents are unemployed. Youth realize that society has given up on them and observe their parents doing nothing. Their mentality is in shape to need money, school's not for me, time to hustle. They begin to feel lost, unwanted, and worthless in normal society. Society feeds to impoverished areas that they have no use in life. They will never amount to anything, and ultimately they have given up on them. This continues to give them the mentality that they only have two options in life: to get married before they're 25 or receive life in prison. Our youth are choosing crime because it is all they know and the only thing that accepts them. Is this how you want your loved ones to feel about their life?
Well, my mother sold drugs and used drugs. My father sold drugs and used drugs. The only influence that I had was the things that went on in my neighborhood. And that was basically people selling drugs and robbing to survive. So after I came of age, I did the same thing. I sold drugs.
Seriously, this is why mentorship is so important and can have a tremendous impact on our youth's lives. Positive mentorship offers qualities that these youth lack in life, such as support, comfort, trust, advice, guidance, learning to build real relationships, instilling hope and belief in oneself, encouragement, options and opportunity, and most importantly, love.
I would have had a potential or positive role model in my life. That I would have made better choices instead of the choices that I made.
Mentorship is one of the main essential keys we can and need to offer to our youth and adults for the prevention of crime and to turn their life away from crime. Offering them somewhere to call home and giving them purpose in life. We need to understand that it's not their fault that they were born into these circumstances and misguided. Hope, faith, and love is what they need. If nobody else is going to believe in them, then we have to. Thank you.
Semester, our classmate Kenneth was a consistent advocate for the creation of a mentoring program. This program would serve the children of incarcerated men and women by providing them with positive mentors and experiences around the DC area. The mentors would be Georgetown students trained by individuals incarcerated at Jessup, as well as returning citizens. Whether it's spending an afternoon at the aquarium or taking a tour of the hilltop, the program would aim to fill the void of an incarcerated parent. As a part of our project, but also as a part of our commitment to have an actual effort on the system of mass incarceration, we are currently working to make this dream a reality. And hopefully with the support of the Center for Social Justice and the Prisons and Justice Initiative, as well as the students at Georgetown, we can have a positive change in many lives. Thank you.
The bell in Utility Hall's clock tower chimed off. 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Students go about campus, laughing, rushing to class, enjoying the start of the weekend. But it's time for us to leave Georgetown, the hilltop. A 4-year home away from home to 7,595 undergraduate students. We walk to the vans, hop in, and say hello to each other.
The drive begins, leaving 37th and Oak Street behind. Miscellaneous chatter breaks out in the van. Stories from the past week on campus, plans for the weekend, and complaints about forthcoming schoolwork. Farther and farther, the vans go north. Farther and farther away is Georgetown, and the safe, familiar confines of the university fade.
Van's quiet as we exit the highway. The 15-minute drive to the maximum security men's prison, Jessup Correctional Institution, is almost over. Excitement, anticipation, uncertainty. Fences and towers increasingly emerge, symbols of our classroom for the next few hours. Stories of violence, corruption, and most of all, injustice come to mind.
Here we experience prisons, people, and purpose. Here we listen to stories from our classmates, our friends. Here we laugh, lament, and labor over experiences from inside prison walls. Here we grapple with ways for reform.
When we all get out of the van and put our keys in the locker and temporarily enter a new world. Anything but a home for the 1,725 incarcerated men housed there. The mistreatment, the chaos, yeah.
If walls could talk,
Would you believe the stories they tell?
If these walls could talk. If these walls could talk.
Hi everyone, it's so great to see you all here. We are the Inside Group, and so what you just saw was a glimpse into one of our typical Friday afternoons into Jessup. And while we are not allowed to bring the cameras inside, what we hope to do is give you a sense of what conditions on the inside are truly like, and why we believe that reform needs to happen from the inside out as it regards the criminal justice system. So my name is Sarah. I'm with my Georgetown classmates, Helen, Meg, Andrew, and Aaron. We constitute half of the Inside Group, along with our 6 fantastic incarcerated classmates, Avion, Turk, Bobby, Leslie, Thomas, and Stu. It's difficult to convey just how horrific conditions inside of prison truly are, but it's been our goal to understand the ways that those conditions contribute to incarcerated people's lives and what it suggests for their lives post-release. Most importantly, we want to show how we as a society are failing to provide even basic human rights to some of our most vulnerable fellow citizens. But with all that said, we are aware that this is a contentious issue and that a lot of people believe that convicted offenders deserve harsh treatment on the inside for the crimes they have committed. But we ask that before you pass any judgment, you hear their voices, listen to their stories, know their names, and regard them as people and not prisoners. Because restoring humanity to people that are often treated like animals is a really, really powerful thing. So, in our quest to achieve that humanity, we opted to create a podcast series titled If Walls Could Talk, which was titled by one of our classmates, Turk. And we explore issues in these podcasts that relate to prison conditions on the inside that our Jessup classmates thought were really important to speak about. And in addition to interviewing our Jessup classmates on these issues, we also interviewed outside experts in these fields. So our podcast is going to be launching on Tuesday, May 3rd, and you can get more information about what we seek to do for the podcast series with our Twitter handle at Inside Prison Pod, and our website, and all that information will be available after the presentation. And so with that, we'll kick it off and turn it over to Erin, who will give a brief overview of the criminal justice system.
So, as mentioned before, we talked a little bit about the cyclical nature of the prison system, but I want to do a quick overview so that we can think about it as we're going through today. So currently there are 2.3
million people behind bars. Every year, we release 700,000 of them back into society, which ultimately saves about $25,000 per individual that's not incarcerated. However, within 3 years, we see that 40% of those individuals violate their parole or recommit another crime and end up back behind bars, which ultimately just furthers the mass incarceration system. So keep this in mind as we go through today, and I'm going to hand it off to Helen to talk more about housing.
Great, thanks, Erin. So our first episode focuses on living conditions, and we were lucky enough to talk to our classmate Avion specifically about this issue. So Avion, just to give you an idea of who he is a model student. He takes lots of classes, has tons of ambition, tons of friends, and in his spare time he actually writes poetry, which we'll give you a sneak peek of later. Unfortunately, Avion is forced to live in housing conditions that can only be really described as barbaric. Just to give you an idea of really how barbaric these conditions are, the great majority of our state prisons are vastly, vastly overcrowded. This often forces incarcerated citizens to sleep on concrete floors or even, at worst, tie themselves to bars and sleep while standing. Really, really abysmal conditions to live in. Of course, there's rampant sexual and physical violence happening inside our prisons, often caused directly by these housing conditions, and these numbers are even vastly underreported for fear of shame or retaliation. And finally, this probably comes as no surprise at this point, but under 5% of our prisons are in regulation with UN standards set forth for just basic space requirements and basic human rights.
To explain or describe the cell is, I would have to say, barbaric, because we have a bunk, 2-man bunk, a locker, and a toilet/sink, which is horrible, and we all want to take responsibility for, there's room for violence. The rules are not there.
So again, here's our friend Avion talking about how these horrible living conditions contribute to his everyday life inside prison. It creates a culture of violence, it institutionalizes gang violence, and it often encourages violence among correctional officers and incarcerated citizens as well.
I've seen some wicked things. Officers or inmates calling inmates, should I say, my bad, incarcerated citizens. I've seen one incarcerated citizen, stab another while he in the handcuffs, and really cut him up pretty bad.
So simply put, prison living conditions contribute to our entire culture of violence. We talk about removing crime from the streets, but really we're taking crime in our communities and moving it right into prisons and jails where it's just hidden. Avion acknowledges some of these, obviously, in his quotes here, but if we're going to lock people up at unparalleled rates, we must acknowledge that we're not talking about eliminating crime for all people, and certainly not our incarcerated friends that we met at Jessup. There's a few sort of specific reforms outlined here that we feel strongly about specifically for housing conditions, improve management and supervision systems, create more transparency. Over 80% of prisons in the United States report intense corruption in the system. Instate minimum space requirements that regulate the UN standards, create alternative housing for vulnerable groups that segregates them and actually fulfills their needs. And finally, I think which all of us would agree strongly on all of our topics, focus on restorative justice instead of violence. Treat our friends like humans and help them restore their lives and help them rehabilitate themselves. When you ask yourself, why should I care? Consider Avion, consider all of our classmates, consider you and I and all of us here, and consider those people being treated like animals.
So my name is Andrew, and I find prison labor absolutely fascinating. And just to kind of give you a brief little snapshot into it, if you actually call the Department of Motor Vehicles in New York State, chances are that call will be actually fielded by someone at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. So it is widespread. And kind of looking at the numbers, then you see a little bit about this system. So the 13th Amendment famously abolished slavery. It carved out a small little exception, and that's in cases of punishment. And this was kind of followed up by a system called convict leasing, which you guys can read about at a later time. I don't have enough time to go over all that. Now, in 1977, there's a Supreme Court case, and with this case, the right to unionize for laborers who are incarcerated was prohibited. And if you want to look at the next number that I have, we have 93 cents. And that is the average from 2001. Hasn't gone up much since then. But it also, by the way, isn't an hourly rate. So that is on a daily rate of what an incarcerated citizen might make inside. And to kind of talk about my kind of prison reform proposal, I actually believe in a system that has the minimum wage as a standard for incarcerated citizens. And I'm actually going to let Thomas talk about that a little bit. But before I get to Thomas, I want to go back real quick. I want to talk about Pope Francis. So I've read a lot of Pope Francis this semester, and I think he really talks about the dignity of work. And that is something that I think is incredibly important, obviously for all of us here, but also for our incarcerated classmates. And to go back to Thomas, he talks a little bit about minimum wage.
And what I should say, I think I should say minimum wage because it's a skilled labor job. It's pretty expensive, and I understand some people have a problem with paying minimum wages.
And even those that have jobs inside still struggle to make ends meet. And so going back to Avion, he talks a little bit about that.
And by the time you buy the stuff you receive from commissary, you're basically.
And so going more into my reform proposals, the minimum wage is something that I think inherently gives dignity of work back to our incarcerated citizens. And I believe it should be in the state or federal guidelines. So if you're incarcerated in the Maryland system, go by the state minimum wage there. If you're incarcerated in the federal system, go by the federal minimum wage there. And also the savings account. So that's an idea that I actually got from an asset building team at New America, which is a think tank downtown. And so it's been proven that those who have access to savings accounts can actually accrue wealth and really be able to better access the economic system. And so with these two, what I believe are modest policy reform proposals, I believe that we can actually affirm the dignity of work for our incarcerated friends.
So episode 3 focuses on education. And simply put by Bobby, they don't invest in education because they don't believe in it. I had the pleasure of working with Bobby all semester and really go through his transformational educational experience, and we talked a lot about what happened before he was incarcerated and then how his educational experience changed once he was incarcerated at the age of 17. So to give you a quick overview, people who are inherently locked up come from racial minorities and people who are more than likely less educated. So 41.3% of all incarcerated individuals have less than a high school degree, so they didn't get their GED, whereas compared to the general population, it's only 18.4%. So this details how people are inherently less educated in prison. To further that, I talked a lot with Bobby about what his life was like before he entered prison and the path that he thought he was going to be on before he actually entered Jessup.
I really never paid attention to opportunity because I couldn't identify. I was going to be in the streets. That's all I knew, man, at that time. Because my father was in the streets, my uncle was in the streets.
When you come from a community where all you know is that you're going to wind up in the streets and that you're going to be in a system of crime, it's really hard to understand the value of education and the potential that you can have once you go to school and take classes. And he talks a little bit more about that in the next quote.
I came in here and I wasn't even able to read. And the main reason because of that, because I didn't want to go to school because it wasn't no use to it. You know what I mean? I was in a hopeless society.
Bobby came into Jessup illiterate. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, and he had no interest in learning. However, after talking to different incarcerated individuals, he decided to go on and get his GED. He became a valedictorian of his GED class and is now a tutor for other students who are learning in Jessup and also partakes in our college courses. His transformational educational experience is unbelievable, and he talks a little bit more about that next.
Before you understand a thing, you get to look at things from different angles. Education helps you look at the world through a floodlight instead of a flashlight.
Bobby only knew of 3 cities going into prison. He knew of Jessup, Maryland, he knew of Tallahassee, Florida, but upon expanding his horizons and really learning through Mark's classes, through this class, he not only learned a lot about himself, but he learned a lot about the world. And I think it's so impressive that one day he wants to get out and help his community and he wants to start his own company. And if Bobby's story wasn't enough to convince you, I'm going to talk a little bit about the numbers of why education is really important. So, educational programs, so vocational programs, schooling, reduces recidivism by 43%. So that's the likelihood that someone after their release is going to go out and recommit a crime and wind up back in prison. You're also twice as likely to obtain a job after you've gone through different vocational and educational programs. And for every dollar that we invest in educational programs, it saves on average $4.50. So whether you're convinced by the humane aspect of everyone deserves an education, or whether you're more over-convinced by the fact that it saves money and it saves taxpayer dollars, it's really important that we value education in prison systems. So what do we do about it? We have to change the conversation from lock them up and throw away the key and not care about what happens to them, to let's reform and rehabilitate the people who are going to end up back in our society one day. I think reinstating the federal Pell Grants and really investing in educational programs inside prison is what we need to focus on.
Thank you, Erin, for educating us. I had the honor to work with Leslie, who we often refer to as the captain of the Jessup crew, because he would keep us on task and make sure we were moving along with due dates and things we had to be doing. He was so optimistic and moved the conversation in an effective way. My episode is called Some Are Not That Lucky, and was an interview with Leslie regarding mental health, because he had extensive experience in working with mental health care both while incarcerated and prior to incarceration. He has years of experience as a counselor, mentor, and a friend of those struggling with maintaining a healthy mental life. The fact of the matter is that prisons are not mental institutions and should no longer be treated that way. America has the largest world economy and is the most advanced country in the world, yet 1/3 of state prisoners have mental health issues. 55% of all incarcerated males were diagnosed with mental illness since entering the justice system. And more than 700,000 mentally ill adults are incarcerated across all state prisons at this very moment right now. These numbers are astronomically horrifying, and the humans behind these statistics deserve better. Speaking with Leslie, the need for reform became very evident.
People literally tried to take their life and had to try to notify the appropriate authorities during my watch. Helping other people help me stay strong.
As you just heard from Leslie's experiences, one of the tactics prisons employ is to allow incarcerated people to mentor and counsel other incarcerated people. One of the reform measures that I call for is proper and professional training for these counselors, and it proves to be really helpful for both the people suffering and the people on the other side, such as Leslie, who maintains a positive attitude throughout all of the experiences he's had and all of the things that he has witnessed. Despite meeting people who are unfortunately not that lucky. Also, mandatory mental health screenings for all people processed through the system to go along with their mandatory general health screenings while being processed into the justice system. And finally, so many problems, as you heard here tonight, we need to allocate more funding for professional staff who can stay through the night, be on emergency call, in case there's a mental health crisis event during non-business hours, and more resources. With all these things combined, we hope to humanize these folks and change the mental health stigma that so grossly exists here. Last but not least, before I fall to the top, I'd like to pass it over to Sarah to talk about solitary confinement.
Thanks, Mike. So the last episode that we have recorded so far, because we do hope that this is an ongoing project even after we all graduate, is about solitary confinement. And I think that solitary is one of those things that we all know myths about or we've seen movies about, but no one actually knows the true atrocities of it because the system is designed in such a way to keep knowledge out and keep everything that happens in. And for that reason, journalists and photographers are routinely denied access to solitary confinement units. So that's why it's all the more important that we get out the information about what's really going on behind those solitary doors.
This being locked in an 8x10 cell, 24 hours a day. When I first went out there to stop, I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed by the system.
So this is one of our classmates, Turk, talking about his time spent in solitary. And Turk has served multiple stints in solitary, the longest being 7 consecutive years. So to put that in perspective, he spent 7 consecutive years locked in a tiny cell for 23 hours a day, which is pretty standard, 23 hours a day, 7 days a week, in a cell that averages 6 feet by 9 feet. So I'm sure we have plenty of people in the audience that are 6 feet tall. Imagine that if the width of the room that you were confined to 23 hours a day was as wide as you are tall, just to put it in perspective. And it's a little bit crazy to think about we are locking people away for indeterminate amounts of time in solitary confinement for a whole range of infractions, from violent crimes, but even things such as being of a certain sexual orientation or expressing an unpopular political belief that can wind you up in solitary. And it's crazy that there's no regulation on how long people can be sentenced to a solitary term when the United Nations Convention on Torture deems that isolation in excess of 15 days is in fact torture. So, in 40 out of 15 states, there are supermax facilities designed specifically for this type of long-term isolation that is effectively torturing our American citizens. And even worse is that there are many prisoners who are released directly from solitary confinement into society when their sentence comes to term. But those who experience that are 64% of those end up back in prison because they're simply ill-equipped to handle with the stimuli and all of the pressures that outside life entails.
Solitary, in fact, does not reduce prison violence. It's, in fact, the few states that have reduced their use of solitary confinement have seen drops in high-level prison violence. Solitary is even worse in producing precisely the kinds of behaviors that people get sent to prison for to begin with.
So solitary doesn't work. It doesn't fulfill its aims of keeping the general prison population safe because, as Jean notes, those states that have actually reduced their use of solitary confinement have overall seen reductions in prison violence as well. It's not safe for the general prison population. It's not safe for the actual individuals who suffer extreme psychological, emotional, and even neurological damage from time spent in isolation. And our classmates have told us horror stories, one of which you'll hear later, about guys they know eating razor blades or trying to set themselves on fire just to cope with the stress of being in solitary confinement. So solitary doesn't work. So we need to slowly, gradually, but effectively reduce our reliance on this as a punitive measure. So one way to do that is through step-down programs, which are being instituted in states such as Washington and Colorado and have seen overwhelmingly positive results, where isolated individuals are systematically reintegrated into larger and larger social groups so that they gain those skills back of how to be in social settings. Additionally, we need to prohibit the release of prisoners from solitary confinement directly back into society when their sentences come to term, because as was mentioned, they just cannot deal with all of the stresses that that entails. And lastly, alluding back to Meg's point about mental health, any incarcerated individuals with mental illnesses should be excluded from consideration for solitary confinement because countless studies show that isolation, especially isolation for extended period of times, only exacerbates existing mental illnesses.
All right, now by virtue of you guys being here, we decided we would give you guys a treat. And so we're going to give you a sneak preview of some of our podcasts. We're also going to show you a poem. Actually, we're going to have Avion read you a poem called Jailbird. Avion, how's it going?
Hey, Jan.
Hey, how's that going?
Good, how are you? It's Helen, Sarah, and Andrew.
Hey.
Hi.
We're feeling good. Thanks for being able to reschedule with us. Sorry about the mishap on Tuesday.
That's no problem.
You can blame that one on me, on Helen.
That's no problem.
Yeah, just as long as I don't blame it on me, I'm happy.
Wow.
Classic, classic.
So, since your time with Solitary Watch, what are the biggest challenges that you face as an organization for some of the worst atrocities that you've seen?
Well, I think that there are two really major challenges that we face. One is that supermax prisons and solitary confinement units are basically domestic black sites.
They want change. So why not you? And why can't we do this together? Why can't we change together? And one person can actually change the world. There was a guy on Suicide Watch, and he kicked the radiator until it burst. And the water and steam literally boiled his flesh until it melted building with the floor, and it just, when the officers came to get him out, finally came to get him out the room, it's like all of this fresh stuff to the floor.
Yeah, I think that the only way to do that is to undo what we created, which is a system where the very people that put in prison, and we've done a great job of dehumanizing them. So if other Americans don't believe that people in prison are human, then they don't have to teach them. And so I think that elevating and amplifying the voices of people like myself, people who benefited from college and prison, is the first step. I can't think of any movement in this country or in any other country for that matter where the voices of people most impacted by a system of oppression are not in leadership. We'll never get Americans to just quote unquote do the right thing if they don't even believe that the people that they're doing the right thing for are indeed people.
In 20 seconds to tell you what this class has meant to me, it's kind of an orientation towards those who in society who I feel are most in need and the most deserving. I think you guys are most in need and most deserving. You know, it's really been a transformative event. And I can't say it all in the 5 seconds I have left. So anyway, Bobby, I just want to say love you from all of us here, and we're going to hope you have a great week, man.
No!
Until that.
Damn it!
And the product of a part-time sobriety, sliding down a highway of a broken society, guiding me through the history of a modern-day slavery. We living every day as a seed displaced by the courts that waved me into the hands of penitentiary that eventually raised me. It's crazy, but I guess you could call me a penitentiary baby. See, I am what they made me. An abstract painting of a juvenile, a man-child, sent to prison, convicted, and sentenced without a parolable future. I am but one of many prodigal sons that will never leave the institution with a hope of life or a constitutional right to fight the unjust political pollution. Those who can't come to a conclusion or tell me what's the solution to institutional overcrowding, which seems to be not their problem. Now my conscience is clouded, surrounded by numbers and distant faces tattooed with traces of hatred, written into a system of offbeat rhythms of division created to enslave without repentance. My experience is fact, not fiction. Listen. By design, prison separates family and friends like blues from rhythms and even faith from religion. I witness relationships become unhinged in this place where innocence is lost. And lost souls are broken but not meant to be. But in every way meant to be just exactly what you see. The continuation of an institutional slavery, or maybe it's just me. And the things that I've seen from the view where I stand as I review where I am in a cell 5x9, trying to find time to rehabilitate my mind because my sentence doesn't mention drug addiction or mental health treatment, so I'm seeking my own alternative to violence. With change that's positive, and I'm positive that there's 1,000 others with potential locked behind prison fences. Silent because society refused to listen, but this is a platform to reform laws and call attention to a business, a plantation, an industry of slave making by any other name, still chained to no rehabilitation, just frustration, warehousing, and punishment. So, dear Mr. Government, I was just wondering if I was the son of your brother's mother, would that even make a difference in the way that I was sentenced? My living conditions where education is limited by visions of recidivism haunting my reentry like the shadows of barbed wire fences. Now I understand the experience of why the caged bird refused to sing, why he remained unhappy and unproductive in everything between the scenes of an unjust system that never taught him how to use his wings. It's a shame, but it's also the truth. You see, that beautiful caged bird and I, we're one and the same, but at the same time, he easily could be you.
Thank you so much for listening to our presentation, and especially Avion's mom, and thank you everyone for coming, especially Avion's sister. We're lucky here to have with us today. We hope you enjoyed our presentation, and if you're interested in following us and listening to the rest of the podcast when they come out next Tuesday, go to the website listed here and use the hashtag InsidePrisonPodcast. And remember, these are our friends and our families on the inside, so treat them how you would treat your friends and your families. Thanks.
Justice system today, specifically those experienced before and inside prison. These problems, however, do not stop with the completion of a prison sentence. As the AFTA group, we are particularly interested in the obstacles and difficulties faced by returning citizens upon their release. The National Institute of Justice estimates that about 67% of released individuals will end up back in prison within 3 years. As a group, we have identified the key issues associated with successful reentry and combined with insights from our Jessup classmates have proposed potential solutions. The after group is comprised of 5 Georgetown students, including Queen, Molly, Allie, Diana, and myself, Nicole, in addition to 5 Jessup students. Ken, an avid Eagles fan who surprised us all with an incredible voice when he performed an original blues song. Harlow, who despite having been incarcerated for the past 34 years, maintains a remarkable relationship with his daughter, who's actually here tonight, and who is quick to show photos of his children and grandchildren. The artist of the group, Ren, who continues to create and sell magnificent works of art despite his current studio limitations, and whose artwork you will see showcased in our video and also outside. Zachariah, born in Egypt to a family of 18 children who achieved the American dream when he immigrated to the United States, became a successful obstetrician and delivered upwards of 10,000 babies, and whose comedic timing is unparalleled. And finally, Makima, or Mayo, as his devoted fans call him, whose rap and creative writing abilities left us all speechless. While our Jessup group members could not be here tonight, their inputs, opinions, and voices form the basis of our presentation and the reason that we are here today.
Do you know what it's like? 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 To be stuck in the mind of what you think you have done?
My name is David Thomas. But most of you guys know me, call me X. And this is my story.
The story of a man who tried to do everything right, but who was and is so far from the justice system, and his past mistakes seem to always overshadow his future. When I was 17 years old, I was sentenced 30 years in prison for being involved in a botched armed robbery, which resulted in the murder of an innocent man. My mother was working hard to support my brother and me, but with my father being incarcerated for the majority of my childhood years, it was awful. My brother and I fishing driving this gal was another way to help her out and get mine. But nothing went the way
Georgetown, at its finest and its cleverest, setting educational bars higher than Everest. Government ex-prison reform project. If you think that you can do any better, be my guest. We're breaking down the walls that bury us in the system. By breaking down the walls and barriers to the system, yeah, a lot of us to be locked in the prison for the crimes that we've done, harms done to our victims. If we're never rehabilitated prior to re-entry, our future will be our past. We're bound to repeat history. We need effective programs that meet specific needs. Even sociologist Robert Martinson would agree. Discretionary parole gradually disappeared. Mass incarceration is so prevalent you can hear the clinging of the shackles and rattling of the chains in the land of the free. And 13th Amendment slaves, it's over 2.3 million Americans ahead. Over 7 on parole and probation trapped out there. Give us very little help, but violators for a lot. In a city full of crime, you violate me if I'm shot. And if I try to relocate, you violate me if I move without permission. Even though I got a job and I'm in school, violate me if I'm driving and mess up and catch a ticket. Violate me if I'm 20 minutes late for my visit. Violate me if I'm this. Violate me if I'm that. Violate me if I'm poor. Violate me because I'm black. Even though I did my time, I'm still judged for my past. I'm a human, I'm a person, I deserve a second chance. Time to redefine the system, because clearly it's not working. Unusual cruelty, Lady Justice is hurt. Who better fit for reform than college students in prison? Think tanks of justice and liberators, so listen up.
Everybody's somebody's every day. I know you're right. Nobody's nothing. That's right. Everybody's somebody's every day. I know you're right. Nobody's nothing. That's right. Everybody's somebody's every day. That's right. Nobody's nothing. Right? You're right. Everybody's somebody's everything. Nigga, nobody's nothing. Nigga, everybody's somebody's everyday. Nigga, nobody's nothing at all. Everybody's somebody's everything.
So you all just watched the film that tells the story of the character X. He's a fictional character that as a group we created together. And you also heard the voices and saw the photos or sketches of the 5 other guys that make up our group, the 5 guys in Jessup. And while the character X is fictional, his story is not. The events in the film were inspired by real-life experiences that our Jessup classmates and other individuals who are incarcerated nationwide, both men and women, have experienced. Hearing about the experiences from our Jessup classmates illustrated to us the idea that even after serving a full prison sentence, it's as though their debt to society can never truly be paid. During our full group classes at Jessup, we brainstormed ways to improve the system, and each Jessup guy contributed substantially to the reforms that we thought of, giving input on issues that they felt the most strongly about and the ones that they had experiences with. The recommendations that we created are intended to assist in allowing returning citizens to contribute to society and to become productive members of their community again. We also hope that the reforms will help society acknowledge that when incarcerated citizens have served their time, their debt to society has in fact been paid.
Our classmates at Jessup each contributed to the project the experiences they have had and ideas that they are the most passionate about. Harlow, like X, has been up for parole 3 times, and it has always come back to the nature of his crime, despite the fact that he has a supportive family, has taken numerous classes, and has an overall wisdom that ensures us that he will be successful upon reentry. Harlow has just been granted permission to move forward in the next steps in his current parole attempt. Hakima contributed his incredible creative writing and rap talents to the project
and the proposals involving alternative sanctions for parole violations involving community service work came from him. He also greatly influenced the proposals about community building on the outside. For Ken, the struggles of being sent back to prison on a technical violation has been a reality. Ken, like X, had to deal with being late to a meeting with a parole officer because of bringing his girlfriend to the hospital. Our proposed changes to the parole violation process were inspired by him, as was the nickname X itself, which he created to reflect the idea that all returning citizens are essentially X'd out from society. Ren, whose artwork contributed so much to this film and to our night tonight, as well as the display outside, is far into the process of being released on parole. He has experienced the hands of the parole commissioners and parole board being handcuffed by the policies involved, and we are greatly influenced by his proposals about increasing the transparency of the parole process. Zachariah has been a facilitator of AVP, the Alternatives to Violence Project, for many years, just like X. From him, we learned the importance of these types of programs and mentorship upon release. So before this semester, I haven't taken a Friday class since sophomore year. I'm a senior. I was this close to not taking this class because of my basic idea that I'm a second semester senior and I shouldn't be taking Friday classes. But my decision to take this class was probably the best decision I made as a senior. I don't know how to properly express to you all how much this class has meant to me. After 7 semesters of the same old Georgetown classmate dynamics, this class was so different. I have 15 dedicated, open, and Georgetown classmates, but more importantly, I got to meet and learn from 16 incredibly talented, funny, intelligent men. Once we broke up into groups, Team After Prison, with our 5 Jessup classmates, shout out to Ren, Harlow, Zach, Ken, and Kima, we formed a circle of unconventional learning and trust. They enriched my Fridays in ways that even professors at Georgetown couldn't, and for that I thank them. In seeing, hearing, and knowing all of the talent that is enclosed in the walls of Jessup and correctional institutions throughout the nation, my heart is heavy because I know as a society, we all are losing. And truly understanding the ways the odds have been stacked up against our classmates, from before they were incarcerated, while they served their time, and the reality that faces them upon returning into society, I feel like we all gotta do better. Somehow this class managed to go beyond all of my expectations. From each of the guys in our group, I learned many things completely regardless of the fact that they are incarcerated individuals. From Ken, I learned the importance of coming into a group with a calm demeanor and an open mind. From Harlow, the importance of keeping family close despite all circumstances. From Zachariah, a lesson in pride and humility. Not too many people can tell you that they delivered 10,000 babies nonchalantly. From Ren, I learned the importance of opening yourself up to individuals and reaching out with love and friendship as opposed to hate. And from Hakima, I learned the importance of sharing stories and sharing experiences in writing in ways that facts and figures never can. I learned so much from these guys, and I hope that by coming tonight, you guys were touched by them as well.
So as many people have said already, this was a brand new class and none of us really knew what to expect going in. And I was in Mark's class last semester. And we went to the Jessup Correctional Institution last semester. And so we were with a correctional officer. You go in, you hand over your ID, you have a phone, and as we were being corralled in our own way, it was very clear that between the correctional officers and the men inside, there was some hostility and not exactly perfect communication. But when we came here all these 5 times this semester, even from the beginning, they were super welcoming, even though at first we were all like trying to keep track of everyone's name. But over the phone, just a couple of weeks ago, Red picked up and there were 3 of us on the line, and without any of us saying who we were, he identified us. And yeah, great friends.
So I just want to touch on one thing that I'm sure some of you have noticed. When we refer to our classmates who are in Jessup, We call them our group mates, we call them citizens or incarcerated individuals. We tend to shy away from words like prisoners, inmates, convicts. And I think that this mostly has to do with the fact that those words are kind of associated with things like danger and violence. And when we think of our classmates in Jessup, we don't associate them with those kinds of things. Instead, we think of these guys with these great senses of humor, who are capable of compassion, who show remorse for their past mistakes, but these guys that we've formed incredible, unforgettable friendships with. And I can honestly say that they are the example of people who are capable of change when given the chance, and that no one should deserve to be judged by their weakest moment or by the worst thing that they have ever done. And I feel so lucky to have been a part of this class, and I will miss my 5 group mates, but also all the incarcerated classmates that I've gotten to know through this program.
Going into this class, I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know how the collaboration within our groups would work, what our final products would look like, or even what it would be like to spend my Friday afternoons in maximum security prison. I had learned of the numerous problems afflicting the criminal justice system in previous classes, but my personal connection to them was limited. Now that we've completed this class and had the opportunity to meet and work with these amazing individuals, I can honestly say that this has been the greatest experience of my life. Working side by side with our Jessup counterparts has personalized these issues for me in a way that a class or a reading never could. We must never forget that while those who are incarcerated may be physically isolated from us, they are not statistics and they are not just numbers. They are people with families, experiences, emotions, and extraordinary stories to tell, and it's time we finally listen. I know that I speak on behalf of all of my classmates, both Jessup and Georgetown alike, and we'd like to thank Mark for this incredible opportunity.
How about another big hand for these 15 years? We have a little bit of time left for Q&A, for comments, for thoughts. I would love to hear from some of the family members and other people who have an experience with these issues. But the floor is open. We have some mics. I want to ask
Have you thought about doing a project for the women? And how did it make you feel working with men? And how did it make you feel by not working with women?
So I think because this is an experimental project and it was the first time it's ever been offered, and Mark had a deep connection with JCI, that's why we went to the men's facility first. I know that he plans on trying to get classes into a women's facility just to get a different perspective, because while a lot of these problems run across both men and women's prisons, you see that women's prisons have a whole different set of problems and issues that go on there. So I bet I can generalize and say for all of us that it was really interesting first walking into a men's maximum security prison for the women in the group, just not knowing what to expect and not knowing what it would be like. However, after our first class and sitting with these incredible guys, it's really just touching, because you realize the humanity that they have and that they really are people and they care about things that we care about. So I think the humanizing aspect that we had and the relationship that we built with them, just as people, was really touching.
Etta, let me also answer your question. Etta, by the way, I know you spent several decades yourself at the Correctional Institute for Women in Maryland. That's my goal for next year. To do a version of this project in the women's prison. I'm back next year.
Thank you. My question is, how did the women feel, specifically the white women in the group? How did you feel? I'm sorry, it's a wrong word. Okay. How did you feel walking in that prison with maybe only 3 African American women with you? How did the men, were you treated differently? Did the correctional officers kind of target you more or target them more? What was the feel? What was that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, I think that, like Erin said, I don't want to be too redundant here, but of course you have misconceptions your first or second time visiting, you know, on sort of what you think about prison at large, of course, and people inside there. And I will say that the women were singled out one specific time and sort of warning us about, you know, potential for violence or sexual violence or anything like that. And I think a lot of us were kind of alarmed by it because our experience had been otherwise. But, you know, again, after that first visit of sort of misconceptions, I think it was quite clear to all of us that, you know, we felt pretty comfortable, frankly. Again, I think there's a barrier in terms of how we think about people inside, particularly Black males. We still live in an extremely racist society, and I think prisons are a perfect example of that, frankly. But I think, again, after your first visit, it's anything but that, really. And there wasn't really any reason for us to feel anything but comfortable.
Just to add on to that really quickly, I just think it's important to note that we felt really comfortable with our classmates, and when we are with the Jessup classmates, we are in an open classroom, so there's nothing, you know, barriers between us. So I think we're very comfortable in that environment, but I do think it's worth noting that, you know, we have to walk through kind of the prison yard to get into the schoolroom, and there have been experiences, you know, where the girls are being catcalled or, you know, whistled at. So we're definitely very comfortable with our classmates, but there's always kind of a guard up, or you know, we're cautious. Can I just add one more? I also feel like this is not my first time in men's maximum security prison, and I feel like I've always felt most targeted as a woman and most aware of sort of like sexism coming from officers and not from incarcerated people. I think the singularly most uncomfortable moment is when you come in, you're sort of being evaluated based on what you're wearing. When we all tried to like really cover up, and we would come in and we'd still be given a hard time. And I think you were talking about, like, as white women, I feel like, actually, like, I know Rashima and Queen got targeted a lot in terms of, like, coming in for attire. I feel like, if you guys would back that up, like, more so than some of us sometimes, so.
We have a question from Bren's brother, Garrett.
How y'all doing? I don't have a question, really. I just want to say thank y'all for everything y'all done. I lost my brother 25 years ago. I was very young. He hasn't really had an outlet to society for people to be able to see who he truly really is. I'm just real thankful for y'all be able to do that, to expose who he is, his art and all that. He's just a very intelligent person caught in a bad situation. Very unfortunate, he had to spend his entire life behind bars because of it. But I mean, that's just the hand that he was dealt. And hopefully soon he'll be back with this. But once again, thank y'all for everything you do. I'm a little jealous because y'all spend more time with him than I do. Y'all only get to see him between a very small space. Y'all got to interact with him. And like I said, I really, really appreciate everything y'all did to acknowledge him and the rest of his fellow brothers.
My question is, I guess, more towards you, Mark. The effectiveness of this, that you call it a study, or how did it do what it was designed to do? How can the outcome be measured from this? What do you expect to accomplish?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, for sure, I went into this with high expectations, but there were so many unknowns, so many things that could have gone wrong. I mean, we could have been denied access to the prison, period. You know, I set up a course that is based on interaction with incarcerated students, and we could have just been shut out, and then I don't know what it would do. There were so many steps along the way, but what happened just exceeded my wildest dreams. I mean, the chemistry that formed on day one was extraordinary. When the students formed groups, everyone at the end of the first day, what, it's time already? No, we don't want to do it. And then week after week, it was extraordinary, the bond that formed. Ultimately though, the goal, and as you saw from the proposals, goes way beyond individual friendships, goes way beyond just the 15 people here and the 16 people there. It's to try to influence a national conversation and to lead to a change in the way in which incarcerated people are treated, both by their separation from society and then the conditions within which they live, and then the obstacles to re-entry when they return. So this is ultimately what we're all a part of, is a larger movement for reform. And I hope that through this forum and through this incredible access that we're able to get and the communication and contact between Georgetown students and incarcerated students, that we've paved the way to some extent and helped contribute to that effort. But that's the larger goal. There's some in the back. Up there, Brian.
First, I want to say thank you as well. I want to basically say the same thing the Red Brother said. A lot of, actually all those guys are dead. Actually, all my friends. I actually got a call from Ken today. Got a call from Q yesterday. And what they asked me to do, so I already have a statement, not a question. What they asked me to do is basically just to come and let the crowd know that it's been worth investing in behind the wall. And what you did was brought light to that. I went to jail at 22, came home after 16 years. At 38, I had a life sentence. But during that time, I ended up becoming a pastor in there, came home. I'm the Reverend now. And I also, too, have a nonprofit, which what we do is we go and mentor the youth, which is called Fully Refreshed, Fully Restoring Every Son's Hope. Because those men, as well as myself, we all had an expectation of past our right now. We wanted to change not just our environment, but also whatever environment we came into. And I'm one of the forerunners of men like that. So I just, encourage everyone that's in this room today and everyone that heard the stories of these men to rally around these people as they fought and fight for the justice of the prisoners behind the wall and the reform of the system, because it's important, because it's people behind the wall that really deserve a second chance. So I appreciate the opportunity to say that. Thank you.
Hi, really quickly. Yes, I wanted to thank you guys also. I really appreciate, you all highlighting, what's going on. 34 years I've been visiting prisons. My father's one of them and featured here. And it's difficult being on both sides of the spectrum, having someone who's the child of a man who's been incarcerated for a crime, and also being the child of the mother who was the product of a violent crime. So it's like I've been stuck in the middle. So I've had mixed views on people who are released back into society once they've been incarcerated for a substantial amount of time. But ultimately, I come back to the same thing. We all deserve a second chance. We all deserve a second chance. So you guys are doing a great thing by raising awareness, but as the gentleman at the end pointed out, what happens next? So I petition everyone else who's here to take the information you've learned today to really advocate, because there are a lot of great men like my father who truly deserve a second chance. I have 2 boys of my own who, when we visit, and we only visit on Family Day, and I apologize for taking so much time. We only visit on Family Day because I don't want to expose them to the true conditions of prison. All they get to see is the fun moon bounce they put out there for Family Day, and the popcorn and the terrible food that these men have to eat on a regular basis. And, for those of us who this is our life, it takes people like you advocating for those men who truly have changed, for them to get another chance to pay taxes, to contribute to society, because there's more money. To me, it's just a money game, and there's a lot of money that stands to be earned from these men re-entering society and making a difference. I thank those of you who come out today who have been able to re-enter. I wish you much success, and again, I thank you for all that you've done to raise awareness. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Mark. I have a question for the students. Mark mentioned, and some of the students in the front mentioned, next year, and when the woman asked about, going to a women's prison, if any of you students had a next year student sitting in front of you, what advice would you give them? What would you tell them about what they had to look forward to in this program or in this class?
Yeah, so I guess advice, I think that one of the most exciting opportunities I've had in this course was kind of to break those barriers and to tear down those stereotypes that we get constantly, messages about incarcerated citizens, about violence, about all these negative things that take place in prison, and we're often presented with these images of everyone who's in prison deserves to be there, and they're bad, and they're serving their debt to society. And one of the things that I always come back to is how every visit that we took to Jessup was chipping away at that stereotype. And I think almost every group referenced to our Jessup classmates as our friends, and that's really the experience that we've had. And definitely just going into it with an open mind. Mark, like he said, as all of us, didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into, and are still making sense of the experience, but that's because we were able to keep an open mind, and we were open to the experience, and now it's turned into this great thing that, and I'm sure I can speak for everyone when I say it's changed our lives. And like I said, I hope that we have made the same impact as well.
One negative thing about this class is that I got over that. You make friends with people who you can't really chill with. Like, you get to know people on like a real personal level, and then you leave and you can't even call them, you can't talk to them.
Cool, man.
Right? Like, sometimes we come in and I have like a really cool week. Like, after spring break, it was difficult. Like, I'm not sure if they want to hear about my spring break because I don't really want to talk about that because I know late last week wasn't there. So it's difficult trying to like navigate friendships with people who don't have like the same kind of freedoms that you have. So it definitely like puts things into perspective. So that's like the difficult part, like trying to recognize that.
So we're inside outside University of Baltimore students, and we are glad to meet you guys, as we didn't get a chance to meet you guys at Jessup. But there's a trifecta effect for me personally. I'm married to a lifer. I'm also part of a group that Maryland Cure, that Vince is part of, that you guys can partake of after your educational classes here, and continue the work that you have done inside the prison, and continue to get to know families and advocate for them. So we are kind of like your peer students that you haven't met. Hello, you me, all of us right here. And we're happy that you guys took the class, because I have a master's in criminal justice, and I pushed a lot of my, well, this particular girl, because she's in negotiations and conflict management. And all I kept saying to all of the University of Baltimore, take the class. It's worth it. It'll change your life. And I hope you guys can continue to work after with groups like Major and Maryland Cure. Okay?
Hi, I'm with Loyola University of Maryland in Baltimore, and I had the great opportunity of doing a spring break outreach where our service topic was prison reform. So first of all, I think you guys did a great job humanizing the cyclical nature of the prison system, and well, on our spring break outreach program, we talked a lot to incarcerated persons and reentry citizens. My question is that there's a lot of the men and women we talked with also talked about rehabilitation inside the prison, but also we had some people who said that there should be more punishment. Is there a balance? Is the balance possible, or do you think that it has to be more on one side than the other?
So I guess my response to that would be, I think right now, looking at it on the scale, in terms of rehabilitation on one side and punishment on the other side, I think overwhelmingly the weights are on the side of punishment.
right? And we've gone on and on about that. And I think what we're trying to do, what we hope to do, is to really tip the scales and push it more towards rehabilitation. And something that I think about sometimes is Avion, the poem that we didn't play. Avion is 2 spoken word poems. The other one is called GPOME, Genocide, Product of My Environment, right? And he talks about in this spoken word poem about how, for one thing, he is a product of his environment in Baltimore. He grew up in a very violent neighborhood. But also, he's a product of his environment on the inside. And basically, it's a punishment. Obviously, it's punishment being inside prison, but it's gone too far, is Borg's point within this spoken word poem. And so, yes, I think there's balance, but I think right now, especially in this country, the scales are incredibly tipped in favor of punishment. In terms of, I think Aaron mentioned, throwing him away, throwing him into jail, and throwing him at peak. That was before prison. Anyway, locking him in jail, throwing him away at peak. You got it. And I think there's a way we can change that narrative, and something that I also did a spring break trip with Matt, actually, that looked at the incarceration system. And something that kind of stuck with me from that trip is that we did a lot of talking, right? And I think it can be kind of difficult to turn that talking into action, but that's where I think wonderful organizations, such as one that Greco's involved in, can really step in. And I think also with all of you guys being here, that eventually this conversation will spur into action. And so I think that action, I really am an optimist, and I really believe that change is coming, and I think it's going to push the scales more towards rehabilitation.
Kudos to the class, wonderful presentations, really outstanding, really appreciate that. I have a question to Mark. I assume the class didn't have a chance to sit down with the administration to talk about some of their proposals, or what are their conclusions that they came up, and is that part of a future plan? Because I would think that would also be an enriching experience to talk to the administration.
Right, well, we haven't yet, since these presentations were finished about an hour before they started. My hope is that they'll watch them. But I also want to remind everyone that these aren't specifically critiques or attacks on the Jessup Correctional Institution prison per se, but rather using the window that we got on that institution onto the larger national problem.
So talk to them about your policy proposals.
Absolutely.
And their feedback about that, I would think would be very
absolutely
educational.
Yeah, that's right.
Hello, my name is Sheila. First, I want to say thank you to you guys. I know that you're doing a lot. Secondly, I want to apologize because I'm late. My brother is actually Abu, and I know that I missed a lot, so I apologize to you guys if things will be repetitive. But I would like to know, is there anything implemented as far as taking anything to the congressmen, or as far as the before prison actions inside and after the fact, or is there something that, or is it just a classroom base to find out what's going on? Is it more so, hey, I'm just trying to learn what's going on inside and outside the prisons, or is it something that you're really trying to implement to our congressmen for these things to really, make it better for them?
My hope is that the students before you who say that their lives have been changed by this course will go on to have careers where they're passionate about this issue, where they spread the word to others, where they get involved politically. Their action proposals do have specific components that I think they can carry out, or at least advocate for. So my hope is absolutely, I would be sad if it ended with tonight. This was a great event, but I hope that this is just the beginning for this project, for these students, for me, for the Jessup students, that we continue and that we grow and we build and that we advocate for prison reform, that we don't just celebrate the lives of some wonderful people that we've gotten to know, but that we actually achieve change that will make their lives better and the lives of the millions of others who are affected by the same policies. And I absolutely adore your brother. I want you to know that.
Can I ask you to speak just to the before group, specifically since it was a part of our group? So we have policy proposals, but something concrete that we're really interested in doing is starting a mentoring program for children of men incarcerated.
And that like came out of our time as a group, and it's something that we're going to continue working, particularly with like Kenneth in our group, but I think hopefully the other members of our group to actually implement here at Georgetown. So that's just something like we have these long-term policy proposals, but we really wanted to get started right away in actually changing the system and changing the cycle that we've seen. So.
Quickly from the inside groups, is something that we really worked for, and our goal was to expose the conditions. And just kind of let people know what is going on inside, because I feel like the majority of the population does not understand. So with part of the podcast idea is you can plug in your headphones and like walk through the streets and just listen to what's going on, like genuine accounts from real people who are incarcerated. So that was, you know, we were hoping that exposure would eventually lead to the policy growth that we do suggest. So listen to the podcast.
So, young sister would like to comment. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that, sorry.
So, just to answer your question, Abu's sister, down here. Sorry. So, my brother's incarcerated as well, and just to have you two here, because I know, and, you know, his daughter as well, it brought me to tears, and it's like, I've been with them the whole time. But the fact that, you know, I feel what you guys feel, and just growing up in the Southeast community, and never having a voice to actually do anything. So for me, like, this is definitely the beginning. And I definitely want to, you know, we're going to continue to do like the mentorship, and I really want to become a mentor to people, you know, and to express to them that I lived the double life too, you know, as what she said, as someone who, you know, your family was incarcerated, but then you're a product of violence, and it's like, you know, what do you do? And so I'm just so happy, you know, I'm really grateful for this opportunity and the fact that you guys invested the time in this, because to you, I don't know if this is personal to you, but it's definitely personal to me. And it really is home, and it means so much to me. And sorry. I feel like, you know, I've never had an opportunity to do this before, and just thank you all for coming so much.
I kind of want to piggyback off of what Abu's sister said. You guys as students have done an awesome job, and Mark as a professor, just a phenomenal job. Whereas though you guys are just breaking into some of the things that are happening inside of the prisons, but we as family members, as loved ones of these incarcerated individuals, we've known about this for years. So we know some of the things that are taking place. And you asked, is this just a class, or is this something where they're going to advocate? We are the advocates. We are the advocates for them, because inside the prison, yeah, they can speak and talk about what's going on, but we are outside where we can actually write the proposals. We can, I know for myself, when my brother was 16 years old, the police came to our house, picked him up, told my mom that they were just taking him for questioning, and that he'll be right back. He should be home before the night was out. He never came home. And I can remember going to middle school and feeling like I don't want to go to school because my brother's trial was taking place. I have to be there for him. And just remembering how the toll it took on our family. And I know a lot of you can attest to some of that pain, some of those struggles that you deal with, and how it shapes your life and how it shapes your family. But you have that opportunity to speak out for your loved ones. And I know personally, I remember watching my brother in the basement, and they would do ciphers, and they would freestyle, so there was rapping and spoken word, and I always wanted to be able to do it. But now, as an adult, I have that opportunity, and so every chance I get, you know, I use my spoken word to speak out for my brother, to speak out for other individuals who are living these type of lifestyles, and participate in all the different programs that are available. I know I have an after-school program, and I realize that if we target the young people while they're young, maybe we'll have a positive impact on them to help to prevent them from getting to this place. Like, they did a lot of talking about mentorship. Mentoring and positive role models makes a huge difference. So I just really want to thank you guys. You did an awesome job with the presentation. you spoke so highly of our loved ones, and I don't know, like I feel like you guys are family. But you guys are
well, first I'd like to say thank y'all for what y'all done because you gave him a voice, but I also wanted to say that Hakima, I had the pleasure of actually seeing him 7 days a week practically for 2 years. I was a correctional officer for about 5 years, and I got to know him very well. He's an excellent, excellent person all around. This is my best friend, who happens to be his girlfriend now. I actually left working corrections because it mentally took a toll on me. You have to be a special type of person, sometimes in a bad way and sometimes in a good way, to remain a correctional officer, to tell someone when to get up in the morning, tell someone when they can eat, and to see the things that they go through. And believe it or not, correctional officers do not see the half of what they go through. The stuff that goes on, we would never know. We'll never be able to see it. The way that we treat people when they come in, that's what they were trained to do. So my question is, has going into the prison and seeing how they were treated, and even how you were treated, inspired you not to be a correctional officer, because I really wouldn't suggest that to anyone. I'm going to be honest, I would not suggest that to anyone. But has it inspired you to possibly work with these people on the inside and change the treatment of them, maybe become a counselor or a caseworker or somebody who can actually change the way that they decide parole? Because firsthand, I've seen it and I know how they are treated, and I've talked to them, and that's what actually led me out of there. I had to go.
Yeah, I think the question of how this is impacting us going forward really speaks to that. I've had the pleasure at Georgetown of being part of a mentoring program that works with court-involved kids, and being a part of this class has helped kind of giving me like a down the road kind of view of that. I actually spoke with Ren and with Harlow a lot about, like I just sat there and asked them like, what would be like the most effective career for me to have, like pursue going forward. I said like, I could try to be a social worker, but like, does that do anything? Like, are there enough social workers in prisons? Like I asked them like, what do you think would make the most impact? And I think it's still definitely a question because there are so many problems with like, they said like there might be like 2 social workers in a prison for 1,700 people. So like being one of those might be impactful, but like to how many people? So I think it's definitely something that is hard to work through going forward, but I personally absolutely would love to work within a prison or within any type of that system at any step of the way.
I also work in the after-school kids program. It's a really great mentoring program that we do. But first I wanted to say that I see how much you guys, especially the family of my incarcerated classmates, have impacted my incarcerated classmates. You guys are a reflection of them and they're a reflection of you guys. So I'd like to be an attorney, and one thing that isn't talked about much is last semester Mark, his best friend was wrongfully incarcerated for about over 15 years, and that's perhaps something that I could help out with. There's a huge amount of people in our criminal justice system through plea bargaining who are wrongfully incarcerated, and maybe that's a way that I could in the future help fix that.
Just to answer your question in terms of how we were treated, every time that we went to Jessup, I think every time our like processing took longer and longer, even though we had just been there 7 days before. But I think, and especially as a woman, one of the things that I think kind of bothered me was the constant, I guess, reminder that I was supposed to be scared, or that I was supposed to feel like I would be victimized, or like I would be in a dangerous situation. And I think we all really struggled with that because we sat this close to every guy in our group, and never once did I feel uncomfortable, never once did I feel, like anything inappropriate was taking place. So I think in that aspect, even from the way that we dressed, we would show up every week in jeans and a sweater and get yelled at, and comments about our goodies being taken and being attacked. So I think from the guards, yeah, and yeah, from the guards, from female guards also. So just the way that we were treated, even in just trying to get in and learn, I always took that as like, I can't even imagine how the treatment is felt by the guys if, you know, we're coming in trying to learn and we're still getting this harsh treatment and this backlash, and kind of made to feel like we were a victim when, again, it was nothing but a positive environment and a learning environment, so.
Before the next person goes, I actually have Hakeem up on the phone now. He's been listening to the entire presentation and he's been getting on my nerves. Babe, can you hear me? Yeah. Alright, you want to speak though? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank everybody in there, everybody from Georgetown, everybody that supported, every professor, especially Mark. I love him, I love everybody in there. You young, it may just be an event or the beginning of a new class or movement. But many of us ahead is, you know, affirmation for us that we're on the right path, that we still are here. And to me, that is right. You know, for people to believe in me and the rest of the brothers ahead, you know, to not judge us by our worst mistakes. You know, really no words that can describe that. So, I love all y'all. I thank y'all, and I hope God bless y'all in every way possible. Thank you.
Young lady over here. There.
So, I was just wondering, so I know all of you have like a background on this before going to this class, but like, when were you really able to see the incarcerated individuals as like real people with real interests and I don't know, just needs and like hobbies and like it's just I feel like it's so easy to just say that everyone in there is there for a reason and they should just stay in there because they've done a crime, but it's just I mean people can change and I don't know I was just wondering like when you really realized that they were more than the crimes that they committed.
That's my 14-year-old daughter.
I would say that, like, before they're incarcerated, you have to think about the amount of youth who spend their time in group homes and halfway houses, and, you know, most of them aren't even home for most of their lives and don't live with their parents, and they grow up in institutions, and just getting to know them, or for me, just being just like them, growing up with them, you know, they're people just like me, and I feel like it's all based about the opportunity or the hope they put in us, and for me, I didn't have to look far or think much and say, you know, these people deserve opportunity, or, you know, are these humans just like us just because they're on bars, you know, are they different, you know, when I went there, I remember the first time, like, we walked in, I was just so full of joy because I felt like I was with my people. And I felt like I was home in the sense that not a place because I've never had a home, but the sense that the feeling, the spirit of being there with them and just knowing that they were just like me and all they wanted to do in life, you know, was have an opportunity, a change, you know what I mean? And you have to get that, and if society doesn't believe in you enough to give you that, then it's a struggle and you have to fight daily. And so, you know, seeing them, it just reminded me more of just don't lose hope, and that, you know, for us to do this and to continue to not give up on them, I feel like that's the biggest thing. And so that's when I realized that, you know, we can do more, and it's not just feeling bad for them or hoping to do better. It's like, get out there and let's do something about it.
So we're well over time. I'm going to let Vincent Greco have the last question.
So, mine is, well, I'm not going to ask a question. Everybody else said thank you, of course, on behalf of all of my fellow incarcerated citizens. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for everything that you did. But also, I want to challenge not only these students, but all students. Last legislative session, myself, college professor, and a lawyer from the ACLU went down to Annapolis, and we met with the Senate President, Mike Miller, and he didn't want to hear from me. He really didn't want to hear from the ACLU lawyer. He wanted to hear from the two students who happened to be here with me. He wanted to know why they came down and talked about solitary confinement. They don't have any people in solitary confinement. They don't have anything to do with it. They're college students from Micah. What do they have to do with solitary confinement? When we got done, he spearheaded the bill and the bill was passed. And so, national average. This is going to reduce it well below half the national average. And so, and we actually even saw evidence of it today, of what it's going to do. But this is the power that you have. This is the movement that Mark has been talking about, because it's not college professors, it's not only our loved ones, because our loved ones can't do everything. We are the advocates, yes. Us and you and former incarcerated citizens, and my sister and my mother before she passed. Yeah, the family is there. But that's not who is going to lead the country and change. Who is going to lead the country and change is you guys, all the students here. That's who's going to lead the country and change, because that's who they're going to listen to. You're going to direct policy if you speak out. And you guys did a fantastic job here today. It's got to go, you got to figure out how to make this thing go national, can't we? You got to figure it out. So, again, thank you.